during protests following last week's election. President Hassan was declared the winner with 98% of the vote.
The night Tanzania went dark, the world saw nothing. No posts, no live videos, no messages leaving the country's edges. Only silence, the kind that hides screams. What started as an election soon turned into shutting down the nation's spirit. Homes were raided. Computer files were destroyed. People disappeared into the haze of night restrictions. But who ordered the blackout? And what truth was hidden beneath it? Let's find out. Dar es Salaam, 11:47 p.m. It began like the power went out. One by one, the lights on phone towers went dark across the coast. Then came the alerts. Network error, connection failed, no signal. Quickly, Tanzania's digital heart stopped. Inside a small newsroom, a reporter named Amina tried sending one last message to Nairobi. They're coming for us. But the screen froze. The blackout had arrived. Across the city, heavy trucks drove through small streets. Police with covered name tags checked doors, taking computers, cameras, and mobile drives. The orders were clear: wipe out everything about the election. At a data center near the port, security forces carried sealed boxes marked secret files. 3.2T. Inside were hard drives holding election videos, unofficial counts, and people's records. By morning, all of it would be gone, wiped clean, melted down, removed from history. Meanwhile, in the poor areas, the blackout meant more than silence. Families couldn't reach hospitals. Parents couldn't call children stuck at university places. Stories spread in whispers, 30 dead, maybe more. When the morning prayer call echoed, it mixed with the sound of military generators. The internet was dead. But fear was alive everywhere. By sunrise, Dar es Salaam was secretly taken over. But the government's silence only made doubt grow. Something big had gone wrong inside the palace itself. Behind the tall iron gates of the palace, President Samia Suluhu sat in her emergency room, surrounded by advisors and security chiefs. The election was supposed to secure her rule, not break it. But the protests had spread too fast. Arusha, Songwe, even distant ports in the west. Cutting the internet will calm them, one aide insisted. No news, no panic. But there was panic. Only now, it couldn't be seen. Outside the palace walls, thousands gathered in silence. Without phones or cameras, the protests became ghostly. No slogans, no signs, just crowds moving through fog and tear gas. In the ministry's basement, technicians worked fast, feeding hard drives into shredders and acid tubs. 3.2 tons of digital evidence wiped overnight. The operation cost over $4.5 million in transport, paid entirely from emergency money. By mid-morning, a diplomatic source in Nairobi told of planned file deleting. International groups tried calling officials but received only a message: government systems under maintenance. Meanwhile, Amina, the reporter, hid inside a friend's bakery. She quickly wrote her reports on flour-stained paper, promising that if she lived, she'd sneak the truth out somehow. But even she didn't know. Somewhere in the spy agency building, a backup server still existed, one that the attackers missed, and as soldiers hunted for the missing files, the first quiet rumors began that someone inside the government was giving out information from the hidden places. Arusha, 10:15 a.m. In the mountain city of Arusha, soldiers blocked every main road. Tanks guarded voting places now empty, the ballot boxes taped shut with black tape. Inside some, the papers had been burned. Others were switched completely. Election watchers, those who hadn't been arrested, were held in hotels under protection. Foreign reporters were not allowed in. One European diplomat called it a takeover by silence. Meanwhile, citizens gathered around battery radios hoping for news. But all they heard was soft music and an official voice repeating, "Stay calm. Things are getting back to normal." At noon, a group of students broke the rule and marched toward the main square, carrying a torn flag. Soldiers fired guns above their heads, a warning shot. The flag fell. But the students did not. They sang instead, "We want our country back." As dusk fell, the first bodies were buried in unmarked graves behind old buildings. The blackout made sure no cameras recorded it, but word of mouth, unstoppable, old, carried across towns and villages. By night, even loyal party members began to question what had been done in their name. A nation built on control was starting to lose control of its own story. And somewhere in Dar es Salaam, inside a secure government place, a single encoded drive started to hum. The one that wasn't destroyed. The truth had lived, and soon it would find a way to speak. State Command Center, 2:45 a.m. The palace halls were filled with quiet talk. Security chiefs moved like shadows through stone halls, holding sealed files stamped "President's eyes only." President Samia Suluhu sat in silence, her hands shaking a little as she watched the encoded video feed on the wall, images of protests, smoke, and fire. "Madam President," an aide said softly, "the raids are not enough. The video still exists somewhere." Her reply came cold. "Then make sure it doesn't." An order was signed at 3:07 a.m. Operation Silent River. Every private cloud, every separate server, every reporter suspected of holding election data was to be found and stopped. Homes were attacked. Family computers were taken away. In total, over 1,200 common devices were seized that night. Meanwhile, within the spy agency, a quiet fight was starting. A data expert named Jafari noticed something strange. One of the main backup drives hadn't been deleted as ordered. Its label read, "Archive 72, restricted." He made a copy and hid it inside a cereal box in his car trunk. Across the city, the protests grew quieter but angrier. Families waited for missing relatives. Power stations blinked as the government cut electricity to certain areas to stop gatherings. But the darker the city became, the brighter its refusal burned. Inside the palace, one question troubled everyone. If the election had truly been fair, why were they so afraid of the proof? City Center, 9 a.m. By morning, Dar es Salaam looked like a city frozen in time. Shops were closed. Buses stood still. Soldiers sat on sidewalks drinking water, their guns resting next to them. The air was heavy, not with noise, but with waiting. People whispered as they walked past patrols. Reporters went missing. Students disappeared after midnight. The blackout had lasted into its second day, but now the silence itself was a revolt. At the harbor, smoke still rose from a warehouse that once stored separate voting machines brought in months before the election. Witnesses said government trucks arrived at dawn, emptied out barrels of fuel, and burned the equipment completely. But what they didn't know, inside a small apartment 2 streets away, Jafari uploaded pieces of Archive 72 to an encoded satellite network. It was only 6% of the full data, but it showed what the government had feared most. Separate counts showing the ruling party had lost in at least 8 major areas. By noon, even army officers began to whisper among themselves. Some refused to do more raids. Others warned that the country is very angry. Still, the government issued its only statement. Citizens are safe. The situation is under control. But everyone in the city knew control was being lost hour by hour. Somewhere near Morogoro, 4:30 p.m. And just as the pressure was too much, something unexpected happened. A voice broke through the blackout, and the silence cracked wide open. It started as fuzzy noise, then a low sound, and finally, a broadcast. A secret radio signal cut through the blackout, reaching villages and towns across the country. The voice was shaking but strong. "This is Amina Suleiman, reporting from Tanzania. The people deserve to know. Amina's broadcast lasted only 7 minutes, but it changed everything. She shared parts of the data from the backup files and read the names of those missing since election night. Her voice was carried by small radios, whispered by shopkeepers, repeated by truck drivers, and written on walls across the city. "We hear you." The government tried to find the signal. Heavy vehicles rushed toward Morogoro, blocking roads and cutting power lines. But by the time they arrived, the transmitter was gone. Only a broken antenna remained, and a message written in chalk. "You can kill the network that are not the truth." That night, President Suluhu reportedly met with her close group again. Some advised starting military rule. Others urged talks, but she said nothing. She only stared at the map of her country, now marked with red dots, every place the broadcast had reached. The blackout was failing. The silence was no longer complete. Dar es Salaam, 5:12 a.m. With the truth escaping through every crack in the wall, Tanzania stood on the edge, between order and collapse, between obeying and fighting. And the next night, it would all explode. The city woke to the sound of doors being broken. Groups of armed trucks moved through small alleys as if hunting for spirits. They were looking for one man, Jafari, the data expert who disappeared with Archive 72. His name had come up after a message was caught between two military tech officers. "He has the copy," one whispered. "The one they missed." By sunrise, the government had raided 47 homes in 3 areas, arresting reporters, engineers, and even students who shared Jafari's last name. Whole neighborhoods were shut down. Meanwhile, deep in the industrial area, Jafari hid inside a cargo truck going to the border. In his hands, a small blue USB stick. Inside it, proof that the election data was faked at least 22 hours before voting closed. But his face was already on every screen inside the control room of the National Spy Agency. "We find him before he crosses," yelled Colonel Mabuana, "or none of us will have jobs tomorrow." As the raids continued, families gathered on rooftops, waving white cloths to signal safe houses for activists escaping. It was a quiet fight. No signs, no shouting, only hand signals in the dawn mist. At 8:47 a.m., a gunfight broke out near the harbor. Reports said Jafari's truck was hit. When the soldiers opened the doors, all they found were empty crates and a note taped to the wall. "The truth travels faster than you." Hours later in Nairobi, a foreign news group received a secret email containing encoded files, marked "From Dar" with proof. The blackout had been broken. Nairobi, 1:40 p.m. Inside a small office of a separate news group, 3 reporters stared at their screens. The files that arrived contained pieces of wiped video, voting places full of soldiers, ballot boxes switched, armed officers counting votes in private houses. It was the missing 3.2 tons of data brought back to life in digital form. And among the files, one video stood out. A high-ranking official ordering data cleaning hours before the blackout. His voice was clear. His name leaked in the file details. By evening, the video spread through private methods and international networks. The Tanzanian networks were still cut. The outside world saw everything. Headlines burst out. Tanzania's file destruction. Government kills democracy. Where is Jafari? At the UN offices in Geneva, diplomats demanded access to the country. Meanwhile, inside Tanzania, the pressure grew. Military leaders began refusing direct orders, saying the country has seen enough blood. The palace tried to stop the damage. A statement read, "Foreign spies are spreading lies," but the world had already moved past doubt. The proof was clear. That night, in a safe house on the edges of Arusha, Emina and a few young reporters gathered around a cracked computer. The data was real. The faces were known. And among the documents, one message from Jafari appeared on screen.
If you see this, I am gone, but the truth is now yours. The truth was no longer a secret, but being seen brought danger. The government's cover had cracked, and what came next would decide whether the nation fell apart or was newly born. Dodoma, 9:50 p.m. The capital burned quietly that night. Not in fire, but in rumors. Inside the parliament, senior officials met secretly as news of the leaks spread among the armed forces. Some ministers arrived with packed bags, others didn't show up at all. The president looked calm on the outside, but her group was shrinking. Loyal supporters began disappearing, escaping to nearby countries or asking other countries for safety. In the city's heart, thousands ignored the rule and gathered with candles, lighting up the night like stars on the ground. "We want names," they shouted. "We want answers." For the first time in weeks, the soldiers paused. Many lowered their guns. The orders to scatter never came. By midnight, the shouting had grown into one single voice. "The blackout ends now." And it did. Somewhere in a control center, an engineer, no one knew his name, pressed a button. The networks blinked back. The internet returned. And the first image to appear on every Tanzanian screen was not a government notice, not a false news, but a photo of 33 faces, the missing protesters. Beneath it, one line glowed in white letters. "They tried to delete us." The blackout was over, but the facing of the truth was only beginning. Dar es Salaam, 8:10 a.m. With the country awake and the world watching, the government's next action would decide its future, saving itself or destruction. As dawn broke, planes full of reporters flew over Tanzania's airspace, not allowed to land. "Security rules," the control tower said. Foreign reporters were not welcome. On the ground, heavy cars stood outside embassies, blocking entrances. Diplomats inside typed fast messages to their capitals, warning the government is breaking under its own silence. Quickly, the leaked video had reached major channels across Africa and Europe. The blackout that was supposed to wipe out truth had instead sent it around the world. President Samia Suluhu faced a broken inner circle. Her spy chief demanded full internet shutdown again. Her defense minister refused. "We can't keep the world blind," he said. "We are out of control already." In Washington and Brussels, emergency meetings started. Aid money was stopped. The African Union demanded a separate checkup. Meanwhile, inside Tanzania, common people broke through fear's last wall. Markets reopened. Students painted wall pictures or reading "Turn on the lights." Church bells rang, joined by the steady beating of drums in the streets. A nation that had been silenced for 3 days was now shouting back to life. At 3 p.m., a secret message reached the president's desk. "Foreign special guests are arriving. Not following rules will be seen as cutting yourself off." She stared at the message for a long time. Outside, thousands marched towards the capital. Inside, her walls began to close. State House, 11:42 p.m. With the world demanding answers and her people no longer afraid, the palace looked inward toward trickery, strong suspicion, and the final end of support. The grand stone halls of the State House had turned into questioning rooms. Ministers, once loyal, now faced questions from men in simple clothes. Each was accused of leaking files, of talking to foreign reporters, of disloyalty. In a locked room, Minister of Energy Yusuf Karume hit his fist on the table. "We're not the enemy," he shouted. "The enemy is the lie we built." No one answered. The sound of his words echoed off the walls like gunshots. Outside, the army had taken positions, but not against protesters. They were guarding ministries, unsure whom to trust. Reports spread of lower-ranking officers refusing orders to arrest common people. One officer, speaking secretly, told a reporter, "We were told to protect the nation, not destroy it." By midnight, 2 ministers quit live on radio, strongly criticizing the government's cover-up. A third disappeared hours later. Rumor said he escaped across the border hidden as a driver. In the palace courtyard, President Suluhu sat alone. She had spent 3 nights without sleep, bothered by the question she refused to answer. When did control become cruel rule? Dodoma, 5:30 a.m. But while her government broke apart inside, something bigger moved outside. The people united again under a single shout echoing through every street and screen. At sunrise, the capital's main square was full. Students, clerks, nurses, old soldiers, thousands carrying small pieces of paper with printed codes. When scanned, they led to pieces of the leaked data, a living record of the truth the government tried to wipe out. The people had rebuilt the proof online, copy by copy, piece by piece. If they destroy one, we'll build 10, said a young coder holding a computer above his head. It was the first digital fight in Tanzania's history. Quiet, unstoppable, and completely visible to the world. Quickly, the government's computers crashed under the flood of uploaded files. Tries to stop websites only created more copies. The system that had made people quiet was now being overwhelmed by their voices. At 9:40 a.m., the military council met privately. Their decision was all in agreement. They would no longer make people follow curfews or stop free speech. When the president's guards learned of it, many put down their guns and joined the marchers outside the gates. The palace stood surrounded, not by enemies but by citizens carrying phones, signs, and songs. And then, without warning, the national broadcast returned. The screen turned black, and a single message appeared in white text. Truth never dies, it grows. Dar es Salaam, 10:45 a.m. As the crowd rushed toward the palace, the final part of the blackout story began. When power faced the people one last time, and Tanzania chose what kind of morning it would wake to. The crowd had reached the gates. Tens of thousands stood shoulder to shoulder, shouting the same 3 words, "No more silence." Inside, the power had gone out. Generators failed. Phones were dead. Even the military radios were blocked, maybe on purpose. President Samia Suluhu moved through dark halls, her footsteps echoing against the stone floor. Her aides whispered about escaping, but every path was blocked. Airports taken over, ports shut, and the main road covered with citizens waving flags, not weapons. The defense chief entered quietly. "Madam," he said, "the people are outside. They say they only want you to listen." Her eyes were empty. "And if I refuse?" He didn't answer. He simply placed his cap on the desk and walked out. By noon, soldiers guarding the palace opened the gates. The protesters didn't rush in. They stood in silence. One girl, holding a torn Tanzanian flag, stepped forward and placed it on the ground, not as giving up, but as a line. Then, for the first time in her rule, Samia Suluhu came out, surrounded by a sea of people. Cameras from foreign networks filmed live. There were no speeches, no threats, no shouts. Just one question yelled from the crowd, "Will you hear us now?" And for the first time, she didn't answer with silence. Dar es Salaam, 2:30 p.m. But the cost of getting back their voice would not come without problems, for both those who ruled and those who fought. The facing of the truth had begun. 2 days after the gates opened, Tanzania stood at a difficult decision. Schools reopened, buses ran again, but whispers filled every market. How many had died during the blackout? How many files were still missing? Checkups began. A temporary group of lawyers, activists, and army officers demanded responsibility for the data erasing and secret arrests. But government officials claimed national security. In the northern city of Arusha, a small radio station that had been raided earlier broadcast again. Its first words, "We are back. We never left." The message spread fast. Every restored signal became an act of defiance. Yet even with talking starting again, fear remained. Families looked for missing relatives.
Hospitals released quiet lists of the hurt. The government promised money but said they did nothing wrong. On social media, Tanzanians abroad started the campaign. Now remember the blackout? Uploading names, photos and voices once erased. The truth was out, but it was broken. Spread across memory cards, cloud computers and whispered stories. Still, one thing was certain. Tanzania would never again sleep through a blackout. Dar es Salaam, 6 p.m. As the sun set over Dar es Salaam, one final broadcast would mark the end of the old rule and the unsure birth of something new. The blackout had lasted 72 hours. The silence had lasted decades. At exactly 6 in the evening, power returned across the country. Phones lit up, screens blinked. The national broadcaster came online, not with government stories, but with the faces of students, workers, and teachers who had kept the protests alive. A young anchor, voice shaking, read the words the nation had been waiting to hear. The government will start an emergency election under international watching. The right to free communication is now given back. The square exploded. Drums made a loud noise. Church bells and mosque calls rang together. The sound carried through the streets like a heartbeat returning to a body that was dying. Far away in a quiet government area, President Suluhu signed her quitting paper. "History will remember me," she said softly, but not for silence. Outside, the people lit candles, for the dead, for the missing, for those who spoke when speaking meant danger. And then, for the first time since the blackout began, the night sky of Tanzania glowed, not from burning streets, but from light. The story of Tanzania's blackout isn't just about power lost. It's about power taken back. When voices rise together, even the strongest walls of silence crack. What do you think? Can a nation truly erase truth in the digital age, or does it always find a way back? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you believe in free voices and honest reporting, follow, because stories like these deserve to be heard.